So welcome back to another great episode here at Table Talk TV. Today we're going to dive deeper into some more of the details of what we talked about last week about the Mormon conspiracy, the integration into modern society. Stay tuned. We're going to dive deep into it. So, Mr. Colleague,
Mr. Owl,
you have some interesting videos and details to dive more into what we talked about last week.
I do.
Let us see what's hidden, buried deep under the ground.
You want to come see my seer stone?
I want to see what is to be sought.
I hope you guys got your hats ready. They're made out of, was it beaver skin, I think, or something like that? I can't remember if it's badger, beaver.
Bats.
Yeah, it may have been bat leather. That would have been pretty cool, actually. I had like a nice pair of boots on it. But I figured we can just take a deeper dive into some of these videos. Last time we just touched the surface. We'll just talk openly about some of this stuff. So there's some more. I've been getting flooded with some more because I watched, a couple of them last time. Now I'm getting flooded with a bunch more. So we'll just look at some of those. Some of them are from the Ward Radio, whatever, how you pronounce it. And the other ones are new ones. So we'll go to this one first.
We know that Joseph Smith dictated the Book of Mormon. It has 269,320 words.
Precise.
There are 6,852 sentences, which
precise.
works out to a sentence length of about 39.3.
0.3.
There is parallel phraseology in the Book of Mormon. And then we have stylometric concerns. Nephi just has a different style of writing. His voice is different than, say, Mormon. There are 208 named characters. There are 45 social geographic groups. There's a monetary system with 12 weights. There's 77 storylines. Coming up with a few plot lines and names, that's tough, but it's doable. But in real time, dictating a first draft phrase that is also wordsmith as a final draft, that is going to demand a lot more cognitive effort than anything else that Joseph Smith did, if all the things he did were using his natural abilities.
This is, that was from the LDS Fair.
It's fair.
On TikTok. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess his proposition is that to create that kind of a narrative, it would be difficult for, I guess that's what he's alluding, it'd be difficult for a human to create that kind of a elaborate narrative. Not that it's impossible, but that it would be difficult. And I guess that's where people need to start assuming in his mind. Do you believe that Joseph Smith was this much of a genius?
Well, if we knew that it was only him writing it, but, he had other people handling the material. So we don't know what was actually added to it and taken out, really. So I'll just play this other one of another guy talking about this. The same guy, too, but someone else is talking about it a little bit.
Joseph Smith have written the Book of Mormon.
The Book of Mormon has 207 characters that are recalled 3,780 times with two possible mistakes. There's been a flipping of Mosiah and Benjamin.
Right.
Okay. There are 147 geographical locations that are mentioned 670 times with two mistakes. There's armies marching to the wrong places. Okay.
But there are mistakes. And as Brian Hales goes on to admit, this was a dictation.
But things are manifested in that dictation that would stress any genius-level person who's ever lived.
Which means there should be no mistakes, as Joseph was simply dictating what God revealed to him, and he wasn't allowed to move on until it was spoken and written down correctly. This is the process both Martin Harris and David Whitmer attested to. So here's the problem. Brian Hales is pointing to
99.9% accuracy.
What he isn't acknowledging is the necessary implication of what he's admitting upon his own paradigm.
It's interesting, and he did at the first video, he did at the front say that it was dictated by God. The first video we played, this Brian Hales guy. But nobody's buying it again, and everybody's still thinking that this is sounding kind of funny. And I go back to what I said last week. This almost sounds like a Christian explaining the New Testament. They'll say, oh yeah, there's some 487,000 variants within the New Testament, whatever. And they'll say, but we have like 99% accuracy. They'll use all these big numbers. But that's actually interesting because that's 2,000-year-old documentation versus 200-year-old documentation. But they're trying to attach themselves and sound like they're actually scholars. They're trying to sound like Christians. So that way, when Christians start talking this way to an atheist, they're going to say, oh yeah, you and the Mormons are just the same. Like, because atheists don't care about either of them.
So I guess it goes back to that argument with like Christians propagating the idea of inerrancy. Because of course, you'll see numerical perspective issues, like maybe in Chronicles or Leviticus or something, there's like numbers that you might find some discrepancies, but that could be a perspective issue, right? Mm-hmm. Comparative to, but those authors aren't narrating that this is pure dictation of God. They're just basically observing something and writing it down to their perspective. It's not like God told them, well, there was 127,000 men out here doing XYZ. But Joseph Smith is alluding to the fact that he didn't observe none of these things. These ain't first-person observations. These are explicit dictations, and he's just simply writing what God said verbatim, or however he interpreted these plates. And there shouldn't be any error because this isn't an observation. This is just dictation.
Well, contradictions in the Christian Bible or the Jewish Old Testament specifically, contradictions between numbers of soldiers in an army or whatever, that's easily explained by the way the Hebrew works because they didn't have numbers like we do. They had letters that represented numbers. And it wasn't as clear as even Roman numerals because we're all familiar with Roman numerals that represent, they're letters that represent numbers. That's just how things were back then. But in the Hebrew, it's a lot more complicated, adding certain letters to other letters, and then some letters look the same as others, just with a little tiny tail or not a tail. It's easy to complicate those things. So when the copyists copied the manuscripts, we can go into all this, but I sound kind of like a Mormon now. This is what Mormons are doing now. So trying to explain this stuff, and yeah, he was like, oh yeah, and with the two books he said they're swapped or something.
That's two names.
Yeah, there's a Christians say the same thing also. Like the Old Testament is the same thing as the Jewish Tanakh. It's just that the books are swapped around. So I was like, this guy it's like they're purposely, and it sounded like this guy was purposely trying to make this parallel between how Christians describe their Bible and how the Mormons describe their Bible. And I don't think they expect people to buy it. I think they expect they know they're going down. They're trying to pull down Christians with them.
Like I was trying to make my point is I think the harder issue is not so much an overspan. Like with the Old Testament, you have this overspan of millennia, and you have first-person observation, kind of like an historian. They may have some inaccuracies just simply because of observation, and that's just expected. Nobody expects anything else. It probably is accurate, but it's a human observation. But somebody's writing this as a first-person witness, and they're just doing this, and that just tracks on like any historical document. But when you have a singular person that says, there is absolutely no eyewitnesses of nothing, I'm just hearing this dictation, and there's one single individual, it has to be accurate because to the T, because there is no transpiring of observation. It's just this, I have this oral dictation from God, or I'm interpreting these plates, but they're confirmed by God, and that's all we have. We have no other forms of confirmation. So even if there's one thing missing that's wrong, the only person to blame here
is God.
Right. And that would be the problem.
But I don't think in Mormon's view, I don't think God has to be perfect. Like as far as like he may be perfect as in like righteous, but he can make mistakes.
Well, then why focus on the 99.9%? Who cares then?
Well, that's true. That'd be a question for Mr. Brian Hales. But yeah, I don't think God has to be completely without errors in their ideas, because God, the Father, was just like one of us at one point. So if we make mistakes, and because we have free will, and they really emphasize free will too, then when you become a father, the Father God, just like, and you have your own planet and all that, you may make mistakes too, and you may dictate stuff, and maybe you leave things out. Or
I guess that'd be a question. It's like, do the Mormons believe that God is omniscient? Does he know everything? Yeah, he might be a ancestral deity, but he's a deity, of course, and he would be the ruling deity of this planet. Is he omniscient? At least of this, let's just limit it to this world. And if he is, if they believe in the omniscience of God, well, then there's still no room for error because he's omniscient. So it's either or. Either he is omniscient or he's not. And if he's not, then that's fine.
Well, it's tough because even asking Mormons, they don't really... not only are they not reading their own literature, they don't care to read their own literature. If you mention Joseph Smith to them, some of them actually chuckle. I've seen people talking out there in Utah asking Mormons questions about the Book of Mormon and what Joseph Smith said, and a lot of them just chuckle when you mention Joseph Smith, like he's a joke to them. They don't take him seriously anymore, apparently. And why would they? He was sexist. He was a bigot. He was a racist. I mean, everything, all the ists out there, he was it.
But then I guess it begs the question to those individuals, then why are you a Mormon?
I know. That's what everybody wants to know. And then what they try to say is, we take the good parts. There's this one lady, actually, who explains it pretty nicely. Maybe we might actually have one of those videos. I don't know if you're ready to move on to another video.
Lead us down the yellow brick, the plates of the Nephi trail.
It's just hard to corner them anymore, because you can corner anybody who has a definitive belief. If you corner a Buddhist, you can corner them on Buddhist teachings. You can corner anybody on the teachings of the person that they're following or God that they're following. Yeah, Mormons are so loose. It's like you can't corner them. And then they're also taught that they can lie to us too. So they're allowed to lie to us. So you really can't corner. They actually just may lie about everything, say that the Book of Mormon says something, and you would never know unless you spent the time to read the whole thing, and then you have to memorize it all like they're supposed to be doing. But yeah, it's just they're not playing with a full deck.
Well, that's the issue of rhetoric. When you make an affirmative claim, the burden of proof is on you. So naturally, yeah, you can corner anybody with logic with just a claim. But yeah, if the claim can be denied and yet still internally be affirmed, well, that's an unfair game of rhetoric. It'd be just like politics. Somebody saying, yes, this is what I'm going to do. And then they get into office and they're like, well, things have changed. But you voted for them on the premise that that's what they're going to do.
And you can't trust them after that.
Well, yeah, but now you just kind of accept it, right? You just kind of have to say, well, I guess it is what it is.
Well, at least in Mormonism, you can always opt out with your free will. You could just leave.
Well, yeah, I guess that would be anybody with a claim. You could always just leave. But
in politics, it's a lot harder to leave your American government. I mean, you can. It's just a lot harder to get citizenship somewhere else.
No, what they'll do is just leave to another party or leave to another ideology or just jump ship to another place they can spin.
Yeah, but if your president, if your acting leader is lied to get there and you voted them in or whatever, then yeah, you can't.
Oh yeah, the citizens, yeah, you just have to suck it up and take it.
All right, well, next video. I thought this one was pretty crazy.
Nephi kills a guy, and the story goes like this. He not only kills him, he cuts off his head, and then he puts his clothes on and then kind of pretends to be him for a little bit.
Okay.
Which, for anyone who served a mission, if you had someone investigating and they read that chapter, you will know that many people think that's a little dark for some reason.
Okay, so I don't know who this guy is. I'm just going to pause it. He's talking about in First Nephi. I had to look this up. Here we go. It's First Nephi, chapter 4, verse 18. This is Nephi he's cutting. It's this whole chapter. This is his struggle. The Lord tells him to slay Laban, and he doesn't want to, but the Lord keeps pressing him to. So eventually he does. Verse 18, it says, "Therefore I did obey the voice of the Spirit, and took Laban by the hair of the head, and I smote off his head with his own sword. And then after I had smitten off his head with his own sword, I took the garments of Laban and put them on my own body. Yeah, even every whit. And I did gird on his armor about my loins. And after I had done this, I went forth unto the treasury of Laban. And as I went forth towards the treasury of Laban, behold, I saw the servant of Laban who had the keys of the treasury. And I commanded him in the voice of Laban that he should go with me into the treasury. So he's literally pretending to be this Laban guy. I'm not talking about James. This is not Laban James, obviously, even though this probably happened around the same time of James.
The NBA.
Yeah. Now, if you go up, this is on LDS website. This is literally the churchofjesuschrist.org. If you go all the way up to the top of Nephi chapter 4 and read their little thing right here, it says, Nephi slays Laban in the Lord's command and then secures the plates of brass by stratagem. Zoram chooses to join Lehi's family in the wilderness about 600 to 592 BC. BC.
Well, I will attest to one thing that, to me, it's one thing that's not too strange about the context if you're thinking about this in Old Testament context. I mean, Elijah did chop up the prophets of Baal into pieces, and then there was deception amongst Jacob and Esau, and Rachel approved it.
You know, the difference, though, is we have... Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say there are these allusions of these connotations. And yeah, we may have like oral traditions of these time frames and all that. I'm just saying the narratives, they're not that strange talking about the guy you showed on that video. He's like, this is pretty dark. It's like, well, if you just read the Old Testament itself, it's pretty dark.
Yeah, no, but then how he tries to justify it is interesting, too.
Maybe it's dark to the Mormons because they don't read the Old Testament.
Yeah. It's probably dark to the Mormons because they're Mormons, and they usually don't drink dark things.
Oh, yeah. Like coffee.
Yeah. Yeah, again, I don't even need to say this, but I'm going to say it anyway. I'm just going to say it.
It's necessary.
Yeah. The difference is we have manuscript evidence and archaeological evidence for the Old Testament stuff happening.
It's true.
Going almost back to that time period, just a few hundred years off. This Book of Mormon, the earliest manuscript evidence we have for this, it's not even, I don't even know if it's manuscript as far as like book stuff, but it's definitely not old.
But it's in the 1800s because Joseph Smith wrote it.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
Now, the plates of Nephi might be dated, but unfortunately got taken away after he translated it, and the angel Moroni had to take it away. But there was those 12 witnesses of the plates, right?
But we have a video for that next, so that should be interesting.
But yeah, the manuscript itself is just 1800s.
It's a little dark, it's a little morbid, until you realize that is the exact same plot as Tim Allen's The Santa Claus. So, kill a guy, wear his clothes, take his job for a bit? Yeah, call up Disney, we got a surprising sequel on our hands.
I think this guy's supposed to be some kind of comedian. Maybe he's an ex-Mormon or something. I don't know. He seems like a ex-Mormon comedian. There's a lot of those too. So he compares the two, and it's not really comparable because Tim Allen didn't cut off Santa's head. And we just watched that I just watched that with my kids actually, involuntarily. He didn't cut off the guy's head. The guy actually fell off his roof. So Tim Allen didn't want to kill the guy at all. There was some stranger on his roof. And he's like, hey, what are you doing up there? And then he slips, and Santa falls and dies. That's not Tim Allen's... That's not his fault. And he definitely didn't, while Santa was laying there, he didn't take up this magical sword, golden sword of great value, according to Nephi, and then chop off the guy's head, holding his hair.
It's a great value sword from Walmart.
Yeah, it's a sword of great price.
Yeah, but, he makes a good point, though. Disney's into that, so it might be something Disney could look into.
I reckon.
Oh. I'm not saying Disney they copied Disney, well, clearly, or Disney. Well, maybe he did. Who knows? It is the 33rd club of Disney.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there's some Mormon stuff in there, but I mean, it's just weird. It's like this weird psychopathic thing that happens. I don't know of anybody in the Old Testament, in the Jewish scriptures, or Christian scriptures doing that, like cutting off someone's head and then putting on their clothes and pretending to be the person.
No, nothing that is that exactly correlated. But I mean, if you're just talking dark, morbid, crazy stuff, there's things that could trump that as well. There's all kinds of crazy things. Like, the number one thing people talk about are the Canaanite children, the Canaanite babies. So they're clearly, no, I mean, if you're a Christian, you have to just be honest. There's some dark things in there.
Oh yeah, if God cut off the babies' heads and then put their clothes on, put their diaper on or something, started parading around, acting like them, then yeah, it's that next level. It's one thing to kill somebody, because usually there's a reason. If it's God, there's always got to be a reason, right? It's not arbitrary, whatever. But to parade around in their clothes after you kill them and, act like you're the person, that's...
Well, if God tells you to do it, I'm sure that's what people would do. Look at Ezekiel. He had to go into the middle of the center courts of Jerusalem and eat dung for 400 days, tied up.
Yeah, but he didn't cut someone's head off.
No, he didn't.
And then put their clothes on and then pretend to be that person. Like, that's the kind of stuff you see in scary movies.
Mm-hmm.
That's that stuff. But, it's giving Chainsaw Massacre, where, the guy chops people up and then wears their skin. That's what it's giving. Santa Claus, the Tim Allen Santa Claus, is nothing like. But again, this is a Mormon attempt. And again, I'm not saying this guy's Mormon. I'm not saying this guy's even part of this agenda.
Well, he clearly knows something about Mormonism.
Yeah, I did not know that that's what happened in the Book of Nephi or the book. I've read parts of the Book of Mormon, not all of it. It's pretty big. I have better things to read. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, he definitely seems he has some bitterness that he's exerting out, which, probably is fair to say, I can understand.
Yeah.
Well,
I can try to.
Well, I mean, I can understand how if you believe in something and you feel swayed and then you realize later on that this wasn't legitimate, that there's going to be overlapping bitterness and trauma there.
Yeah.
And so the comedy is one way to deal with that.
Well, up next, we'll talk about the plates.
In 1922, a discovery was made that showed how a large collection of metal documents could be hidden up, forgotten, and remain unknown for a long period of time, similar to the Book of Mormon gold plates. Talapaka Annamaya was a 15th century Hindu saint and poet who reportedly experienced a vision and then wrote a poem or hymn every day for the rest of his life. In 1922, it was discovered that each of his 13,000 poems were inscribed on over 2,000 copper plates that were kept in a vault-like room in the temple of Tirupati, Andhra Pradesh in southern India. When all of the contents of these metal plates were transcribed and published in 1998, it constituted 29 volumes in the Telugu language. Producing that many metal documents would have been a very costly and laborious project, but it showed that large records created and preserved by Nephite writers were possible in the pre-modern world. To learn more, Evidence 242 at Scripture Central.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. So, there you have it. It's possible that they do exist.
Well, yeah, nobody's saying it's impossible, but clearly she's pointing out somebody that the Hindu culture recognized as somebody very unique, very special, quantified him as a saint. So clearly they saw this person, we'll just say, as a genius, somebody recognizably unique.
And rich.
Sure. But they're the people who could articulate such novelty. And I guess the illusion is that this singular man, because they point out that there are witnesses to attest to the transcribing or the dictation, the transcribing of the direct dictation of God from Joseph Smith. But it's Joseph Smith. Is Joseph Smith that man? Is he that man that could do that kind of genius level articulation? Superseding that of Shakespeare, superseding that of Mark Twain, superseding that of all the literary geniuses we know. Is he that man? That's what you would have to conclude, or they're saying you have to conclude this is divinely dictated by God, with two errors or a couple errors, but it's still dictated by God.
Yeah. Well, there is a difference between him and Mark Twain. And Mark Twain didn't demand a following, and sell an idea that there's a happy place and a bad place in the end. And if you want to go to the happy place, you got to follow me very closely and do as I say and do as I do and all that.
No, I think he was an atheist.
Yeah, if he would have done all that, though, he probably could have got a larger following because he was probably a lot more
astute.
Yeah, astute. Joseph, though. And I'm not talking about of Arimathea.
You're talking about Zephaniah Benaiah.
No.
Okay.
I'm talking about Mr. Smith.
Agent Smith.
Mr. Anderson.
I always get
Joseph
that confused.
Smith.
Yes.
Well, these plates, if there was these golden plates preserved from Hinduism going back to an ancient period, there should be no problem for, the book of the Mormons to show us the plates too.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't they just show us the plates? Like, the reason Christians can't show stuff like the resurrection of Jesus or whatever is because you can't. By its very nature, it's supposed to be invisible. But these golden plates of Mormon, they should be, they're there. I mean, they could actually pull them out.
Well, I don't think they can because I think the angel Moroni took them away.
They're supposed to be underneath the temple.
I think after he transcribed them, the angel Moroni had to take them away.
We should have his direct transcribed documents then.
Yeah, you should have Joseph Smith's, and you have the 12 witnesses of the plates.
So then what's all this 1 in a million talk from this lady? She's already talking about that it could exist, but what is it? What difference does it make?
No, I think what she's making is it's just like the other guy. It's making the correlation. Somebody had plates, somebody transcribed these plates, and they did this articulate narrative, these 13,000 poems. So it's possible that a person could do such thing. Why would you assume that Joseph Smith couldn't do such things? Of course, there was already people who did the same. And so Joseph Smith could have easily done the same.
Yeah, but we have the plates from
That is
Hindi.
true. We do have those plates. But somebody did it.
But Brahman didn't come and take.
No, he didn't.
Plates.
They decided to leave him here and give you 5,000 arms with it.
That's okay.
Yeah,
I don't mind bearing arms. Well, should we go to the next video?
Absolutely.
So if you want to dismiss all of that, let's go to Hiram Smith. This was actually himself writing this. He said, having given my testimony to the word of the truth of the Book of Mormon, the renewal of the everlasting covenant and the establishment of the kingdom of heaven in these days, and having been brought into great afflictions and distress for the same, I thought that it might be strengthening to my beloved brethren to give them a short account of my sufferings for the truth's sake. I thank God that I felt a determination to die, rather than deny the things which my eyes had seen, which my hands have held, and which I have borne testimony to. And of course, 5 years later, he would prove that he wasn't fibbing right there and would actually die, reading and prophesying or teaching from the Book of Mormon until the day before his death.
Dude, that is hardcore.
That's soft. That's softcore.
Okay, hold on. Time out.
Yes.
Look at this guy's face. He actually believes everything he's saying right now because it's so hardcore. So when he's talking, when he's reading it, he's look at his face, his gestures. He's going like this with his finger because he's like, this is real. Okay, look at this guy.
If you want to dismiss all of that, let's go to Hiram Smith. This was actually himself writing this. He said, having given my testimony to the word of the truth of the Book of Mormon, the renewal of the everlasting covenant and the establishment of the kingdom of heaven in these days, and having been brought into great afflictions and distress for the same, I thought that it might be strengthening to my beloved brethren to give them a short account of my sufferings for the truth's sake. I think.
So this is how usually Christians will read like the book of Josephus, any kind of ancient work of antiquity to prove a point, like, if they're trying to prove like the 70 AD destruction, or they're trying to prove their interpretation of something Paul wrote about head coverings or something, and they're reading ancient materials. I've seen Christians do this, and other historians like one of those got you type faces. Like it's smug, and it's like, look, this isn't for me. Look, you were just reading it right off the, plates. It's like, how did he do that?
Well, I mean, I keep making these revertive correlations because I can understand that somebody who believes something, they're not going to say satirically. They're going to say convictionally. Clearly, this individual believes this, and since he does, it'd be no different than a Christian saying, "Look at Stephen. That's hardcore. Them jokers were ready to stone him, and he's like, I'm going to say this to my death. I ain't giving it up." And Christians say, see, that's hardcore.
Well, we have historical evidence for this stuff.
I get that.
That's the difference.
You know what I'm saying?
When you're reading history that is made up, like you read these comments, everybody says the same thing.
But if you believe the thing, that's all I'm saying is like these Mormons believe it. So I get why they say it. They're not saying this because they don't believe it, clearly.
Yeah, this man believes it.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know, but the hardcore guy.
Well, regardless, the reason why they would say hardcore is because it's kind of like the Christians. They see something, I guess they read something, and they're like, wow, that's hardcore. And so I get that sympathy of you believe something and you read it, and that seems very motivational. But yeah, the difference is, what do you have as an evidence to attest to this hardcore narrative?
That's what I'm saying. The people in the comments are going wild for this specific video. One person says, okay, so people of many other faiths say the same thing for their religion. What's the point?
Well, it'd be no different than like when I watch, and this is an overcast. I don't believe in Mormonism. I don't attest to the truth of it or anything. But it's no different than me watching a movie, right? I can watch a movie and they have a very strong theatrical, dramatic scene. But what is that to me? It's more like a parable. I'll use it as an analogy in some future context with a conversation. It'd be no different than that. Like I could read something in the Book of Mormon and it could have a theatrical, dramatical scene. And I can say, wow, if I could make that as an analogy, that's pretty powerful as a narrative. But that's all it could be. It could just be like a novel, a narrative. And any novel can have powerful, theatrical, dramatical, moving narratives. And that's fine, just like any novel or movie. But to attest to it as something that this strengthens my faith, that's the difficult part.
Well, it seems like they're accomplishing, if my theory is correct, that Mormons are doing this to bring down other religious perspectives, specifically Christianity, then, this is proof to that fact, what this guy says. In the comment section, he says, okay, so people of many other faiths say the same thing for their religion.
Yeah.
So it's starting to work.
Yeah, I will say the point of what you were talking about last week, it does ring more in the sense of the similarities because Christians do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And they are moved by it. They are emotional by it because it is convictional. And yeah, when you create the similarities between the two and there is no contrast, then yeah, people will start saying, oh, this is just the same old rhetoric, just a different book.
Yeah, the difference is one has history and the other one doesn't. But yeah, when you're talking to an atheist or agnostic or anybody else, they don't care about that. They're just hearing Mormons and Christians talking about all this history and they're like, I don't care. I'm not going to do the research to figure out which one's right, which one actually has the history. So they're both probably wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So Mormons are being successful. They're going down. They know that they're losing millions of people a year. So their attempt is to try to grab and pull as many the Christian faith specifically down with them.
And the thing that just came to my mind, and I don't want to go down this rabbit trail, but it seems like this may be a larger, your idea of what the Mormons may be a larger schema in the general narrative plan too. Because if you think about the government, like recently we've had all these aliens and stuff talking too. What does that do? If you continue that narrative, you almost do the same thing, right? You start just jeopardizing history in general.
Mm-hmm.
And so then pretty soon people are like, I don't know what to believe by history anyway. I don't care if it's science, the government, Mormonism, Christianity. It's all like, who knows? So now it's almost like it's a universal agenda to just belittle the legitimacy of history in general.
Yeah, especially when you have Steve Greer or the Greer guy and other alien people, talking about how the Bible talks about aliens in it. So you get everybody believing that aliens have history now because they're just doing the same thing Mormons are doing. They're claiming the history of the Christian faith. Now, what people don't see is that the Christian faith must have a lot of history to back it, but nobody sees that. They just see they see aliens when they look at Christianity, they see Mormons, they see everybody else, and because everybody's attaching themselves to something that is historically founded.
Well, it's the same kind of function too. The hierarchy, you have an authority like the government or Congress or a scholar that's historical in the United States economy or function, and then they attest to these kind of narratives of aliens or anything else, and then they propagate this as evidence towards historical fact. So you have the same function. You have an authoritative figure alluding to some strange narrative that they are propagating to their general audience. You must believe this as fact. And then when you see other individuals like a Mormon or other authorities, and then they propagate strange narratives, then you have to believe that as a historical fact. It just kind of generalizes that history itself is whoever the authority is, and you shouldn't really question the authority. Who cares if there's real evidences? We've never seen a UFO. Who cares? This is what we say. Like, you've never seen the plates. Who cares? This is what we say.
Yeah, especially with this whole mud, what's it called? The Tartarian mud something, mud flap, mud something, where everything's been covered in mud. But this requires you to believe. You have to believe that the Roman Catholics have been in control of history the entire time, literally since the beginning. They've been controlling history, and we can't trust any history except for the Tartarian history, which says that, everything's made up except
the
their
one
history.
difference I will say, though, that no matter what, there are always going to be archaeological artifacts. There's always going to be some kind of archaeological document. There's going to be something that is farther than just single isolated dictation by an individual.
Well, you can have all the artifacts like statues, monuments, structures, swords, shields, all this stuff. But Tartarians will say they'll use all this and reinterpret it for their purpose. Like there was giants and fighting angels and all this other stuff, sea people and doing all this throughout the whole world. But because there's no manuscript, we can't trust any manuscripts. So we basically don't know what happened according to Tartarians, because the Catholics controlled it all the manuscript evidence. We don't know what any of these things mean. It could mean anything. It's just up for grabs. Well, yes, there's artifacts, there's archaeology, but who knows what any of it means or what it actually entails outside of what the Catholics told us to believe about it.
Yeah, but that just adds to that narrative again, which is history itself is being flatlined. Like there's no peaks. It's all flatlined.
Yeah. History is a mystery. If you don't believe me, look at History's Mysteries.
Blue's Clues.
Yeah.
Well, what else we have in the Trails of Nephi?
I thought you'd never ask.
I always ask.
So I went ahead and prepared another one.
That's great.
The Book of Mormon is super complex. If you haven't read it before, it has a ton of new scripture, different ideas that expand upon the Bible and expand our knowledge of Jesus Christ. And it really is doctrinally super deep. It's not like it's just some random book that just doesn't mean anything or some pointless story. There's actually so much depth and the characteristics of it that help people be better. That's why the Book of Mormon is still being talked about today, whereas other false religions that people have started have died out. Because the Book of Mormon is so rich and deep and has so much meaning to it. It's not just some book. It's really the Word of God.
So I have one statement. Have you looked up solipsism?
All right, next video.
Yeah, silent night, stars are bright, lighting up the sky. But there is one that's new and sent here just to testify of the Son of God, that's what it signifies. Jesus said from up on high, soon salvation would be nigh. Yeah. The shepherds sat there counting sheep until an angel came, told them how there's one new lamb and Jesus is his name. While the shepherds went their way, the wise men saw the signs, took one look into the sky and knew their king was sent that night. Silent night.
Yeah.
No.
But that ain't nothing new. I remember back in the day, the Mormon rap has been around for, we'll just say a hot minute. So
yeah, they've been beating the block.
Yeah, I thought they would come with like urban attire now, but they're still wearing the same attire from the original like 1999 Mormon rap.
Yeah.
Because those modern podcasters, they figured it out. It's like, we got to look like these people. That guy's still strapped on.
Yeah, they have to look like witnesses.
Yeah,
but not for Jehovah
or the plates.
Well, they're witnesses of Mormon.
I think they're witnesses of Smith.
So they're Mormon witnesses. Mormons witnesses.
They're Smith witnesses.
Oh yeah, Smith is witnesses.
Yeah, Smith, not Smith in Westerns. It's Smith in witnesses.
Eastern. Well, yeah, I don't know what to make of it.
That's good.
All right, next one.
That's what we're cooking with.
we're smoothing through.
Now, when it comes to the extra-biblical doctrine of the Trinity, despite its abominable creedal origins,
That's some blue glasses.
the one thing that makes it difficult to accept whole cloth from myself and several other Latter-day Saints is the reality of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Now, if you believe that the resurrection was a literal and real event, which as a Christian I would certainly hope so, there are many holes that the resurrection uncovers when it comes to how tenable the Trinitarian belief actually is. First and foremost, what did Jesus do with his body after the ascension? Not to mention what he told Mary Magdalene just after he was resurrected. Jesus saith unto her, Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brethren, and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God. Now, when it comes to the extra-biblical doctrine of the Trinity, despite its abominable creedal origins, the one thing that makes it difficult to accept whole cloth from myself and several other Latter-day Saints is the reality of the resurrection of Jesus
Is he an Aryan?
He might be.
That died off with Santa Claus.
No, apparently not. Yeah. He just doesn't want to accept it whole cloth, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe half cloth.
Yeah. Well, if you're going to be a man of the cloth, yeah, you have to tear it.
Yeah, I was waiting for you to say it.
Yeah, the man of the cloth.
Man of the veil.
Yeah, well,
so is he alluding that, is he a Mormon? Is he alluding that Mormons have an issue with that? That's why he's propagating that.
He's a Mormon.
Right.
This is called the LDS Lion. And he's saying that Christians have a problem with the doctrine of the Trinity. He says it's just abominable.
The abominable creeds.
Abominable, yeah.
Yeah.
The abominable Trinity. Yeah, and it's because I don't really know what he found for proof of that. He just threw up some passage, and I guess that was his mic drop moment, but apparently it was good enough for the earliest Christians to think Jesus was a God, the Holy Spirit was a God, and the Father was a God, and they're all the same God. But there's three in one. I mean, the earliest Christians believed this. We know this, and the Apostles' Creed, and these documents predate Mormonism by almost 2,000 years. So,
well, I mean, I guess for the Mormon, they have to. They can't have. I'm looking at my cake, or I'm eating it, right? So you're either going to be polytheistic as a Mormon, or you can try to maintain a monotheistic idea and be Trinitarian. But Trinitarianism kind of defeats ancestral deities because these are multiples. They're not one. Trinitarian idea tries to keep the monotheistic construct by making it one. Nobody denies that they're God, but they try to keep it as one. Well, you have this God and that God, and you're going to be a God. And so it's either or. So you just have to affirm polytheism because you're going to become worship too. So it's one of the two.
I would have to look it up. It's either Tacitus or Pliny the Younger who actually thought it was weird that Christians were monotheists, just like Jews. Those two religions in the ancient world, to the Gentile Greek pagan people, Jews and Christians were weird because they were monotheistic, both of them. And again, this predates Mormonism by at least 1,500 years. So I think it's pretty easy. And again, it stood the test of time. This monotheistic idea has stood the test of time.
Well, it's an old argument. They were arguing about this during the first 300 years. 400 years. They were all sitting there. Arian was prominent, but there's more people than that. There's just a common notion. If there was an argument what that attests to, that there was a common doctrine that was being propagated, or there couldn't be a testoing to the doctrine. So if there is an Arian, there has to be the opposition to Arian. So that means the common notion was there was something that was saying there must be some kind of Trinitarian function. So there isn't like this obscure elude ideas like, oh, it didn't exist. Clearly it exists because there was opposition to it.
Right, that was at least in the 4th century, but we have documents, and that with that new archaeological discovery, with that seal, that floor seal that actually said Jesus is God, there's just a lot. Now, again, they're not denying, Mormons don't deny that Jesus is God. They just deny that he is the only God. They deny that the Father is the only God and that the Holy Spirit is the only God. They deny that. And that's where he's calling that abominable, to say that we are monotheists. Monotheism is abominable. And it's like, well, then why read the Old Testament? Why read the New Testament? Just keep the Book of Mormon. Because anywhere you go in the Old and New Testament, they all say God is one. It's literally the Shema, or the Shema, in the Old Testament, and then Jesus quotes the Shema in the New Testament. Jesus himself literally quotes the Shema, which is, listen, Israel, your God, Yahweh, your God is one. Or our God, Yahweh, our God is one. And then Jesus quotes it when the Pharisees ask him, what is the greatest commandment, to try to trip him up? He says, but he answers, the greatest one is, and then he quotes the Shema, and then he says, and the second one is just like it. So Paul later quotes the Shema, but he's talking about Jesus. He's actually putting Jesus as that Kyrios, the Lord, quoting the Shema. So he's calling Jesus that one God. And it literally is in the Shema. It says, our God is one. I mean, you can't really get around that. That's Old and New Testament. They both believed in one God. And again, we don't need to quote Pliny and Tacitus and other Gentile authors of that ancient world who thought it was weird as well, as we do think it's weird. So, I mean, maybe it is weird, but I don't know if I could say it's abominable.
Well, like I say, I've been saying this whole time, I understand why somebody would say that. If you have a conviction of belief, you're going to speak out of that conviction. So clearly, if you have a belief system as a Christian, then clearly you're going to think opposition is abominable, whatever it is. You might think Mormonism is abominable. So why would they not think the same thing that Trinitarian thought is abominable? I get that.
Well, I usually stay away from the word abominable.
Okay. Well,
not just because it's hard to say.
You just called the snowman.
I don't like the word heresy and abominable, and these are not only, they're so subjective. Calvinists call Arminians heretics. Arminians call Calvinists heretics. Everybody in different denominations calls all the denominations heresies or heretics. And it's just tired.
Well, it's just a connotation of a negative disposition, and it's convictional. So yeah, it's an emotionally charged description, but I get it. I get why people would say that if you have a conviction, it's an opposition.
Yeah, it's just subjective. I just say if it's logically consistent, if you can show me a working faith that is logically consistent, then you might win me over. It's not going to happen by calling what I believe abominable or a heresy or whatever. That's not going to win me over. I'm just going to say, okay, well, yours is. I'm just going to throw it right back at you, and rubber and glue, and sticks to you.
Well, it's no different than the Old Testament at times. The Jews would have thought, they would have said the same thing. I don't know, they would use the word abominable, but they would say it's blasphemy.
Well, they did, and they killed Jesus for saying anything different.
They would say it's blasphemy. We're just saying the same thing. It's the connotation. So I get why they use these phraseologies, quoting Brian Hayes, but yeah,
that guy should have been a math whiz.
I know.
Well, here's our last video.
Wow, that's magical. Is this South Park?
This is Jesus. Wow, that was big.
Man, that was good timing. I mean, that guy fell right on the dime.
This kind of looks like those master artists.
Looks like it's in a church.
Look at this. His hands are. It looks like he's praying. Like he's got his hands up. So this is not LDS.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
But the people in the comments are saying things like, you know what? I'm a believer now. Another person said, bro's wrestling for my sins.
I'm a believer. Not gonna leave her. Oh.
Yeah, well, someone else said, why is this not on the news?
It's being suppressed.
Someone else said, it's like a Steven Seagal Aikido demonstration.
Yeah, he just needs to wrap up his back hair in a ponytail, and it'd be right on par with Seagals.
Yeah. Well, I didn't even notice. Apparently Santa was in the background this whole time. This is like that monkey experiment. People are playing basketball and there's a monkey that walks in the background. We're all focused on the Son of Man, and we all missed
the glory of man.
Yeah, the saint. Look, there he is. He's in the background. There he is. This is there.
That might be his tag team. You know how they have tag team wrestling?
Yeah, he's removing his hat. He almost removed his hat.
He's like, call me in, bro. Let me in. I've been a good boy. I'm on the good list. He's like, no, I got this, man.
Yeah, look over here. This must be Santa's bag right here.
Yeah, bag of tricks.
Look at this. Man, Santa's sack is full.
Yeah. It's the spirit of Christmas.
Yeah, it is.
Man,
I think this is a church.
That's accurate, man. The timing of that slam. I give him some credit, man. That's theatrical.
Look at his hands. It's like he's motioning for people to rise. It's like a resurrection. He's like, rise,
and take some more.
Boom.
Take that, devil.
He's about to ascend. Well, this is what's at stake.
Not like a stake, like the Jehovah's Witnesses believe.
I actually think this is exactly what the Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons believe.
Talking about the single stake at the resurrection.
No.
I mean at the crucifixion.
No, because this one doesn't have any lifeblood in it anymore. This is, if for the JWs, this would be Michael the Archangel wrestling demons or whatever. It's definitely not God. So it's just creation wrestling with other creation. If this was, and for the Mormons, this is just another God wrestling other gods.
This is the brother of Jesus.
Yeah, the brother of Satan.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised some pitchfork guy didn't get on there. They had Saint Nick. But Jesus is, he's a god just like anybody else in Mormons. So all these guys are gods. And the only one that's higher is the Father God, but the only reason he's higher is because he earned his way there. And one day Jesus will become the Father, and one day we will all become fathers if we're obedient to Moroni.
Talking about like the Catholics, because they're all fathers.
Honestly, Catholics they're just like Mormons. They're not as old as Christianity. They broke off too, but yeah, they're Jesus. He could have been wrestling Mary, because according to the Catholic faith,
it'd be the other way around.
Mary would be wrestling him.
No, she'd be the one slamming. She's the protector.
I know. She actually shields us from the judgment of her son, according to Rome. And when in Rome,
raise the eagle.
Yeah, you just throw your Hail Marys.
Was that all you have for this week's Trail of Nephi?
Is that all you got? I do. Yes. For now.
Well, that's good. I understand there's a time when we have to open the seal and we have to close the seal, unlike the Tomb of Peter, which is going to be live streamed. But
yeah,
so if you're into that, but thank you for all of that, and I'm sure you'll give us more as the seal reveals more. But until next time, hopefully you guys enjoyed this week's episode of Table Talk TV. More evidence to show the collusion that Mormonism is trying to integrate into making a flatline into history. So leave in the comments, tell us what you think, hit that like button, and tune in next week.
It's like their hand is like reaching from the grave as they're dying. They're trying to grab somebody else.
Ringing those bells.
Yeah. Yeah, but they can't reach them.
No, it's Christmas season.
That's right.
Yeah.
So they're too high for them to reach.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yep. The only thing they're going to get is a mistletoe.
We're signing out.